Hey, it's Nancy from Nancy Chu Homes. I'm a realtor here in northern New Jersey, and in my 18 years in the business, I have transacted over $500 million of real estate. So when you go on a lot of the, talking heads right now about real estate, you're hearing a lot about recession. It's happening again. People are starting to talk about that again. And that's going to be one of the big prediction factors of 2025. Are we going to have a recession? How many homes are we going to sell in the country, right? And listen, recession always comes from a big shock to the system, right? Like we had a mini recession during when COVID happened because, people didn't know what was going to happen. And of course, that market rebounded relatively quickly. In 2008, we had a collapse of the secondary mortgage market system, so when we had another recession then, of course, that was the big one that everybody remembers. When the interest rates started going up in January of 2023, we had a recession then as well, right? Mainly because what happened was everybody said, oh my God, the rates are going up. I don't know what to do. I'm just going to stop. So the recession definition isn't necessarily the textbook definition of recession. It just means, we're looking at it from a perspective of when does the market just sort of hit a brick wall, right? And then we kind of all have to rebound from that. It's interesting because we've had a really strong labor market during this whole process. And that labor market is going to be a really important part of this conversation. As a matter of fact, I think it's going to be sort of the pivotal thing that we're watching. We watch a lot of things, right? We look at CPI, we look at, production, we look at all these things. But the truth is, all these things combined, I think there's some deeper challenges that we have to trying to rebound the number of sales that we have in this country, which are directly tied to affordability. And I think that, paying attention to the labor market is going to be a really big deal. We have a massive savings buffer in this country. A lot of folks have had a ton of money saved up, which they did throughout the pandemic, compared to what they would have if they'd been allowed to travel and run around. And don't forget, the stock market has been extraordinarily strong during this whole process. And for years, because of the low interest rates, we've had a ton of home equity buildup for folks who own houses as well. They've watched their houses, really climb in terms of value. And, at the end of 2024, folks who owned homes, we saw the net worth of households that owned homes, have about 169 trillion of net worth, compared to 114 in 2019. So we do a lot of, 2019 is a good sort of marker because it's sort of the pre-pandemic number. So we've seen like a 40% growth in net worth for folks who own homes. And the super depressing part about this is there's absolutely folks who did not benefit from this period of growth, and that would be renters, 100%, right? If you didn't own something, you couldn't grow equity. As a matter of fact, there's a really strong likelihood that the rent that you're paying is liable to go up because at some point the cost of living has gone up and you cannot control that, right? You can't control whether or not there's going to be, a rent increase here or there. And so it's almost like the renters have, they're like double whammy, no benefit, right? It's funny because like homeowners have experienced this massive injection of equity, and we're just talking about a significant amount of wealth creation for them. And they are out there spending. Consumer spending is very strong. And, we have an economy that's basically based on consumer spending to stay strong. So, so far, so good. And here's the problem, right? So if you've got consumers with increased wealth spending, then they're injecting money into the system and they're injecting a demand for goods and services. If they want more things and want more services, then the demand, goes up, and then you have a supply and demand issue. So then what tends to happen is the cost of these goods and services also can go up, which of course is the double whammy part for the renters that we're talking about. Not only are they not building house-based, house piggy bank wealth, they're also, going up against consumers who have gained this wealth and who are spending. And then we're talking about, you throw on top of the previous supply chain issues we've had and, the bird flu, for instance, as well, the cost of things have actually gone up. So prices are actually higher now. And so, these renters, they don't get to create the wealth, and they also have to pay more for things because other people are demanding the goods and services, and we don't necessarily have enough supply to go around. So anyway, this is pretty devastating. I'm not gonna lie. It's devastating for renters, it's devastating for young people. So back to that labor market question, all right? One of the primary concerns we're having right now regarding the labor market is that, I don't know if you guys remember, but, pandemic time, we had this thing called it was like the Great Resignation. People were changing jobs because they were discovering they could work from home, they could do it from anywhere. And they also discovered that because of the talent shortage that we had in this country, you could quit your job, go get a new one for 15% more in salary. And then the crazy thing is 10, 11 months later, you could do it again. So we had this thing called the Great Resignation where everybody was changing jobs and they were getting significant job increases every time they made a move. That was insanity. But now in 2025, we're seeing it's already been coined the Great Stay, which is we're now seeing that hiring rates are, the lowest they've been in 10 years, and the job openings are down, and the quit rate has fallen below 2%. Now, what does this mean? It's a pretty strong indicator of the mindset of the American people right now. And it could be because, we've just had an election, so things are kind of up in the air. I don't know that I would consider it super stable because things are happening so fast right now. It does feel like the American worker does not feel that there's any opportunity for them for growth, which is why they've just decided to hunker down and stay in the jobs that they have. Well, I hate to say this, but if that's the case, then there's a really strong likelihood that you're not going to make a move, which means you're going to hunker down in the house that you currently own. And your house so far for a lot of folks is one of their biggest investments. And it's an investment that's been growing. So they're not going to be willing to let go of that house unless they have a reason to make a move. Does that make sense? So it's almost like there's a correlation between, if you're not moving jobs, then you're likely not moving homes, right? You're going to stay in your home because I really need you guys to understand this. Most sellers are really just buyers, okay? They're really buyers first because nobody, to quote Logan Motashami, sells their home in order to be homeless, right? They sell their home because there's an opportunity for them to go someplace else. And yes, while there are estates and, death, distress, divorce, all of these reasons why people sell, but the vast majority of homeowners that have traditionally transacted are folks who are looking to move up, move down, stay in the area, take a job across the country, make their move there. Well, if we're in the Great Stay and nobody's going anywhere, then there's no reason for someone to want to buy a new home, and so therefore no reason for them to want to sell the current home that they're in, right? And given that wage growth remains kind of around, just under 4%, which is sort of traditionally what it's been, then it's not the highest it's been, it's not the worst, but this is what in the end is sort of all pointing to this giant affordability issue that we have, because if people won't sell their homes, then the homes that are being sold are going to be extraordinarily expensive because the demand doesn't stop, because we are still as a country, did I say company? Oh my God, I'm so tired. We are as a country still absolutely going to college, graduating, getting jobs, getting married, having babies and things like that. So we're continuing to make new household formations, with a lesser supply of housing for them to go into. And that is what points to that giant affordability problem that we've got right now, okay? Okay, and so the last thing I want to talk about today that has to do with affordability is to sort of clarify just how sort of siloed our various markets are by region right now in this country. Does that make sense? So the Northeast and the Midwest are experiencing the strongest markets right now. And then you have other markets like, so for instance, everyone right now points to Austin. You're like, oh, Austin, so sad. Austin has the opposite problem, right? They've got inventory and not a lot of buyer demand, or at least not as much buyer demand as they're accustomed to over the last few years. You know, housing demand, of course, and I'm just going to reiterate this, is tied to wages, jobs, and wealth. And housing supply, of course, is tied to how much building you've had in an area. So I think we want to give a definition of what a strong market is, right? As we break this down sort of a little bit on the local market level. A strong market or a hot market is really based off of the definition of whether it's a tight market, which is a supply versus demand issue, right? So Northeast, Midwest, you see strong wages, you see lots of jobs, lots of jobs development, and the folks who live there who own have already created a significant amount of wealth in the properties that they own, right? So those are the tightest markets. I literally just saw that there was a house in the town of Bloomfield, which is one of my major market areas, that received 76 offers last week. That's how tight my Northeastern market is right now, okay? This slowdown of job mobility is just making this worse. So the markets that get tighter, like the Northeast and Midwest, we get tighter, and the markets that are sort of looser, sort of remain loose. And I think the biggest question, for me right now is that at some point, is that pressure gonna break? Like, is our Austin prices gonna go down enough that they become attractive enough that they start to attract people back into that market? There is that possibility, right? So all in all, this whole conversation I'm having today is about, we have to watch the job market. The job market is going to be a huge pointer as to whether or not we see more housing mobility, right? Job mobility tied to housing mobility. And the more mobile we can become, the better our pricing is going to be, right? So sadly, unfortunately, even if all the existing home sellers right now decided that they were going to sell their homes, we still really wouldn't necessarily have enough homes to go around, given our population, number one. And number two, given that most of those home sellers are also buyers. So we'd be injecting a huge number of buyers into the market as well. Okay, so in conclusion, what I'm saying is, let's watch the job markets. If we see people start to want to be able to move from job to job, then I think we're going to see some of the housing inventory loosen, right? And then, I hate to say this, but a loosening housing inventory, more houses, that is the only way we do this. I can't even begin to talk about building. We all know that building is building is one of the biggest challenges, especially in those tighter markets, right? If you think about the Northeast and the Midwest, we are the markets that have the most stringent zoning rules, the most stringent regulations. And, until we start looking at deregulating, people are just, developers and builders are just not going to want to build in a large scale in our areas. All right, guys. So that's an idea. Let's watch that job market. And I'll see you guys next week.